Now that we've finished the heel turn, it's time to make a start on the gusset. My working yarn is on the right hand side because I've knitted back across rather than leaving it on the left hand side as I normally do, so that when I have picked up my second set of stitches here, I'll be able to knit across with that yarn and then I won't get the bumpy line where the join is. And so what we're going to do now is pick up those stitches down the left hand side of the heel flap. You've got a big stitch where even on the ribbed heel flap you've got a big stitch where you can pick up, so you can either do both stitches or just one. My preference is always to pick up the first leg of the stitch rather than the back one, but it's entirely up to you. If you want to pick up both, that's absolutely fine. And I'm going to join in a new yarn down this side, so just the same way as we have done before. I'm putting the yarn over the needle, bringing it through the stitch, and I'm going to twist the yarns together so that I don't get a hole or don't lose the yarn. It's anchoring it down. Needle goes in through the stitch, yarn wraps around the needle, and then pull it through to create a loop, and that's picking up and knitting a gusset stitch. I'm going to do that for a few stitches down the heel flap, and then I will join in another colour so that I can continue the patchwork along the gusset. When you've picked up all of the stitches along the heel flap, you're going to make an extra stitch in the gap between the heel flap and the gusset. You don't want to pick up the loop between the stitches. What you want to do is make sure that you actually pick up a leg of the stitch in between and you knit into that one, and that's what's going to stop you from getting a hole. It's an extra stitch, but don't worry because you'll decrease it later on when you're working the rest of your gusset decreases. You'll also see as you look down the length of your heel flap that your yarns are safely anchored just as they have been elsewhere in your sock. Now that we've picked up all those stitches, it's time to knit across the top of the sock. You could put a stitch marker on if you wanted to, but you just lose it, so you might as well take it off for now, but you will need to put one later on, and I recommend that you do that even though your join will be at that point. So what we're going to do now is use the ends of the circular needle to knit around, and we're going to just knit as we have done before. So you just start knitting. The loop is a little bit smaller than it was before, and you need to make sure that you don't get a hole by twisting the working yarn that you are now going to use around the other one from the gusset stitches, and then you just start knitting across, and every time you come to another colour change then you twist the yarns again just as you have done before until you get to the other side of the top of the foot stitches, and that's where we're going to pick up the second set of stitches up the heel flap. Here we are just about to pick up the second set of stitches, so we'll need to remember to pick up an extra stitch in the gap, but first of all I'm going to put a stitch marker over the end of my needle so that I don't lose where I'm up to. And I'm going to use the same working yarn because I'm going to carry it along the gusset stitches. Now, just like on the other side, we're going to pick up that extra stitch, so make sure that you pick up the leg of the loop and not the loop itself between the stitches, and then you're going to knit along, making one new stitch for every 2 rows of heel flap that you knitted, and you'll be able to knit into the big stitches that were along the side of the heel flap. Join in new yarns wherever it feels like a good idea to do so, because this is your sock, so you can add in the patchwork wherever you want it to be. So remember to anchor the new yarns under the working yarn, and you're going to twist them as you are working along. So just as you have done before, you bring the end of the yarn over, knit the stitch, and then take the end of the yarn back down again as you knit the stitch again. And you can do that for as many times as you like, because you can make the patches as big or as small as you want them to be until you get to the yarn at the heel flap, and that's where you're going to pick up the yarn that you left previously. So this is great if you want to have the whole of the sole of your foot in a different colour, or if you just want to work stripes, then it means that you're not getting a join across the base of your heel, which I don't think would be particularly comfortable, but if you don't think it would bother you, then that's absolutely fine. So just going to knit across these stitches here at the top of the heel, and then once I've done that, I'm going to work my way back down the side of the heel flap again towards the first decrease. But when we come to work our way along these heel flap stitches again, what you will notice is that the yarn is in the wrong place, and so all you need to do is just make your first stitch and then bring that yarn underneath the previous working yarn, because you're still going to knit with it even though it looks like there's going to be a great big loop. And then what you're going to do is you're going to anchor the loop. So put your needle back into the stitch, tuck it underneath the loop, and then you're going to knit the stitch, and it'll hold that loop down at the same time. It's just like when you were holding the yarn down when you were adding the contrast yarns in, except that this one is attached at the other end. So make the next stitch, and then the one after, you're going to tuck your needle under the loop, wind the yarn around and pull it back under the loop and then through the stitch, and that holds it down. Knit another stitch, needle in, under the loop, wind the yarn around, bring it back through the loop and back through the stitch. So I've made my first decrease, which was knit 2 together, and you can see that here. And now what I'm going to do is put a stitch marker on, because it'll be useful to know where it is that the decreases actually are. So I'm going to slip at the stitch, make the wrap just as we did before by winding the yarn around, and then I'm going to turn my work, I'm going to slip the stitch back over again, and I'm going to purl back along all of the stitches. So that will take me back along all of these stitches until I get back to this stitch marker, and that's where we're going to make our second decrease, 3 stitches before the marker. So I've purled all the way back here, I've stopped 3 stitches before this marker, and now we're going to do the decrease on the purl side. Now you've 2 choices here. You can either purl 2 together through the back loop, so that means twisting the stitches around so that you can get your needle in so that you can purl through both stitches. It's really quite fiddly, particularly if you've got your stitches just a little bit tight on your needles. So as you can see, I've just about done it. It's not the easiest stitch to do, and then you purl those stitches together and slide them off. What you might find is an easier option is Barbara Walker's version, where you purl the first stitch, you then slip that purled stitch back onto the left hand needle, and then slip the second stitch on the left hand needle over the first stitch, and then slip it all back onto the right hand needle. Purl the next stitch, slip the marker, and then you can carry on purling around. Now you can see when you look at your right side of your work, then you can see that there's a decrease, and it is slanted in exactly the same way as a slip slip knit would decrease would be if you were knitting a sock and doing the decrease on the other side. So you're going to turn your work back so you can see where you're going. You're going to carry on purling around all of those stitches until you get to where your wrap stitch is, remembering that you need to twist the yarns as you come to them so that you don't get a hole. When you reach the wrapped stitch, then you're going to treat it exactly the same way as you did with the stitches on the leg. So you're going to pick up the wrap, put it onto the needle, and then you're going to purl both stitches together, slip the marker, wrap the yarn around the needle, put the stitch back onto the left hand needle, slip the marker back over again, and then now you're going to knit around all of the stitches. So remember to twist the yarns as you come to them, and when you get to the decrease that would have been the slip slip knit one, you're just going to knit straight over the top of it. So there's no need to do anything at all with that decrease on the knit side. You're just going to keep knitting until you get round to the decrease on the other side, and then you're going to do a knit 2 together decrease. So when you come to the knit 2 together decrease, you're going to knit your 2 stitches together, and then when you come to knit 1, you'll find that that's the wrap stitch. So you need to pick up the wrap and put it on your needle, or just knit the 2 together. You might find that you can slide your needle onto both of those. You're going to slip the stitch marker, and to slip the stitch from the left needle to the right, wrap the yarn around it, and then slip the stitch back again to the left hand needle, and turn your work ready to purl back around the stitches again. Move the stitch marker over, and then you're going to purl all of the stitches until you get back round to the other marker, and then you're going to do your knit 2 together through back loop, however you're going to do that stitch.